Hello, Tech here. I got another tutorial for you today. So here at Tech, we believe technology is for everybody. So I want to share my engineering knowledge to all of you to hopefully inspire at least one of you to go into engineering. So we are going to review the analog write function for the Arduino. What you'll need today is the Arduino R3, the power cable for it, some resistors, some LEDs, and then finally a potentiometer. So we're going to run these LEDs on an analog write function, and then we're going to use a potentiometer to actually vary what that looks like. All right, to implement the analog write function, it's actually quite easy. You have this analog write, you need your pin number, and you also need a value. So you're going to assign a value between 0 and 255 in order for this output to ring true. So 0 is basically off, 255 is completely on, and so anything in between is somewhere between those value on and completely off. And then these typically run at 490 hertz. So we think of PWMs as a percentage of the duty cycle. So when we set it to 0, we're going to have 0% duty cycle. So if you put it on a scope, which I'll demonstrate later, you're going to see no voltage on there. Or if you put it on 25% duty cycle or value, whatever that is, you can have 25, 50, 75, 100%. So you're limited by the resolution of your PWM. So ours, for the Arduino, it's an 8-bit. So here on the Arduino, you're limited on the number of pins that can actually use this analog write function. Now these are labeled in the diagram as PWMs. So we here have pin 3, pin 5, pin 6, 9, 10, 11. So if you actually take a look at the Arduino, those little squiggly lines right there that let you know that those are analog or PWM outputs. All right, this is a simple circuit setup. So we're going to have an LED that's going to have a resistor. I think I put 580. You can use whatever value as long as it brings the current below that of the pin on the Arduino. Otherwise you're going to blow it up. If you don't know how to do those calculations, I got a video right here for you. All right, we're going to start with a blank sketch. First, we're going to assign our variables. Now I'm adding a second LED here just so that way you can see the difference when we set these up. So we're going to set up an int LED 0. We're going to set that to 3. So we're setting it pin 3. And so we'll do this again. We're going to call this one LED 1. We're going to set it to 11. All right. As far as void setup, we don't actually have to do anything how I'm doing it set up here. So finally we get into the code. So simple analog write function. We're going to pass in that LED 0. We're going to assign it a value. We're going to assign it low so that way we can actually see the differences between the two, because if it's too high, you're not going to tell. So let's set it to 75. And copy this. This be 1, and then we're just going to set this to 255. All right, so this is a simple function. It's going to analog write to pin 3 at a rate of 75. So that's between a value of 0 and 255. So you can do a calculation on what the percentage is, but it's pretty low down there. Now let's go ahead make sure we have the right board and the right COM port. All right, we do. So we're going to check the sketch to make sure everything's runs. And then let's see what the camera says. It actually sold up better than what I thought. So here we have that running. I'm going to go ahead and stop this for you so that way you can see what's going on. All right, you can see in the scope, it's showing you that how much of a PWM cycle we have. So it's not fully on. So if I run this and I set this on the other one, we get a signal that it's fully on all the time. So that's what we expected. All right, we're going to use what is called the Arduino map function here. So this simply takes a one value range and set it to another. And so I drew out a diagram so we can visually see the flow of data right in front of us. So we're going to have an input of an analog signal. That's going to be 0 to 5 volts. That's going to be dependent on which Arduino you're using too, obviously. So if you're using 3.3 volts, you won't have that. So we're going to use that analog read function for our pin. It's going to have a value between 10 to 1023. So you're going to get that value and we're going to feed that value. So this is your low value, your input value, or your from low value. And then you're going to have your high value. So 0, 1023. And then you're going to want to have an output value of between 0 and 255. And then finally, that's going to go into an analog write function. That's going to turn on a LED on a PWM. So I put a little thing in the bottom corner there, and it tells you what the map function. So you're going to have the map function. You're going to call it out. You're going to put in a variable, your variable name. You're going to put that from low value. For our example, it's going to be 0. From high value, so that input is 1023. And then finally, you're going to have your to value. So that's to 0, and then to high, which is 255. This is our simple circuit setup. So we're going to have a potentiometer that is fed into pin A0, and that's going to provide the output for our LED. All right, we're going to take our code from before and we're going to modify it for our needs. So let's go ahead and just get rid of this LED one. That's gone. Now we're going to need a few more variables. So there's going to be a variable that brings in that analog input. Now let's call that int analog in. We're going to set that to 0. And then we're going to need a conversion value. So we're going to call this int analog. Let's call it analog to PWM 0. We're going to set that to 0 as well. And then finally, we want to call out our pin that we want to put on our analog. Or analog read. So let's go int A0. And let's set that to A0. Or let's call it analog read and then A0. Now down here we need to put in our code. So we have this analog read function, this analog in function. And this is going to equal analog read. Did I spell it wrong? And we're going to read in from this pin. All right. That's it for that one. Now we're going to have this analog to PWM value. Well, let's go ahead and use this. So this is going to equal to the map. We're going to put this value in here. All right. So we're reading in a value between 0 and 1055, right? 1025. So first one's going to be 0. Next one's going to be 1025. So this is your analog read string value that you can have. Excuse me, this is 1023. So this will vary based upon which Arduino you're using. So this is 2 to the power of 10, I believe. And then finally, we have our values that we want to convert to. All right, so 0. And then this is going to go all the way up to 255. Let's put our semicolons in there. And then finally, we have to pass this value into here. So we're reading in the analog read function from pin A0. We're assigning that the variable analog in 0. Now we're going to have this other variable analog to PWM 0. And so this is your map function, and this is transforming it into from a 10-bit to an 8-bit value. And so we'll get that value from the output. So if we have a voltage of 5 volts, it should put out 255 on this function, and it should have a 100% duty cycle. Yeah, I spelled something wrong on here. I spelled this variable wrong. I corrected that now. Anyways, let's upload it and see what we get. All right, here's our circuit. Now, as you can see, when we turn it, it changes brightness. So that's exactly what we wanted it to happen. Well, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, hit a like, subscribe, notifications, do all that other stuff. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I got a Brunky Twitter. And, thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate you showing up today.